welcome to another episode of Unfiltered at the Water Cooler. My name is Melissa Evers. I'm co-founder of Kreneon and head of ecosystem. I am delighted today to welcome our CFO, Randy Meitze, who is going to talk to us a little bit about his journey and his reflections on what we're building with Kreneon. So before we get started, Randy, I'd love for you to tell folks a little bit about yourself and how you got here.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me. So I've really built my career around one goal. So that's being the high impact financial partner that can help investor backed businesses really scale through various inflection points. And so to do that, I really decided that I needed like the foundational institutional grade knowledge that most finance professionals have. And so I began my career with a pivotal internship at Vista Equity Partners, where I really developed that financial foundation and really saw firsthand how elite operators build businesses. And so that drove me to investment banking in Houston, working on energy deals. Again, just reinforcing that financial sort of horsepower that I needed to accelerate me throughout my career. And so after that, I moved over to the operational side at a private equity-backed business and really learned a lot there in my first operational seat. Ended up exiting that business and then working at a number of different private equity-backed and VC-backed technology companies, which led me to starting my own fractional CFO business and then introduced me to Kreneon.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we are certainly very glad to have you as part of the team. And you're in one of my favorite cities, Austin.
Yeah.
That's also awesome. All right, so you've had an amazing career thus far. You've secured over $730 million in venture finance for a lot of different companies. You've executed big M&A deals and navigated some exits. You could join almost anybody you wanted. So what is it about Kreneon's approach to the globe's water challenges that you were like, this isn't just like a climate or sustainability or a feel-good project. This is a massive financial transformation. What got you excited?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, throughout my career, I've really been drawn to companies that are poised to fundamentally reshape global industries. And so I've looked at and evaluated hundreds of pitch decks and different business models. And the consistent theme across those has been like most technology there solves problems of convenience. But water is really, I viewed it as a problem of human and economic survival. And so when I first evaluated Kreneon, I didn't really see a feel-good sustainability play. What I saw was a company that's building really critical missing infrastructure for a massive unmapped financial asset class. And so that's when I realized it was much larger than a sustainability platform. It was an opportunity to really build the financial rails for a massive physical market.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. So when you think about your corporate treasury background and various types of financial infrastructure backgrounds, why is it that traditional water infrastructure financing is so broken right now? Why is it that clean energy is funded by like 75% private capital, and yet in water it's like 15%, 20%, and in that and that's like corporate finance. It's not, it's corporations who are like, oh, I need water, so I'm going to build water infrastructure. It's very, very little institutional private capital flows to water. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, I think the core issue is that every project is underwritten almost from a first principles perspective. So when you look at oil and gas, for example, the market has defined grades, delivery conventions, and benchmarks. In water, 1 cubic meter can have completely different economic meaning depending on where it's produced, its quality, and its production pathway. And so the result really is like repeated diligence. The contracts are bespoke, and there's limited price transparency and very little comparable performance data. So the plumbing, the financial infrastructure there is really broken. From a private capital perspective, they desperately want to invest in water. They just haven't had a transaction platform that can actually give them the data they need to clear these transactions in a much more efficient manner. And so Kreneon's role is to make these projects much more accessible to capital through a common unit, trusted records, repeatable contracts, and verified settlement data. So we're building the rails for institutional capital to finally enter the water market.
Yeah. So that's a great segue. Kreneon's model introduces this really interesting concept of unbundling the physical molecule of water from its environmental attributes and the environmental validation data that we collect, a technique that we call water revenue strips or data attribute stripping. As our CFO, could you walk us through the mechanics of that? How does separating the data attribute from the physical water molecule actually create an asset that a tier 1 commercial bank or lending institution can model and then underwrite?
Yeah. So I would frame this slightly differently. We're not really trying to separate value from the physical water. We're creating a trusted commercial record around the production of that water. So think about what had to happen before oil became a scaled financial market. It wasn't enough for producers to say that they produced the oil. The market had to define the grade, the quantity, the delivery terms, and the price convention. And so Kreneon is creating that structure for net new water supply. Production is first measured and verified at the source, and Kreneon represents that output as a standard water lot, which is one verified cubic meter carrying its quality, location, timing, production pathway, and other relevant metadata. And so that unit can move through a registry, a standardized contract, and a verified settlement. And so that settlement is critical because it connects the physical outcome to a real economic value. And so once one transaction really provides a price, but repeated comparable transactions give the price observations that we need, and we can normalize those observations transparently to begin to create reference curves that buyers, lenders, and developers can use.
Yeah. So let's talk about some hard numbers. Kreneon's financial validation models indicate that by backing infrastructure projects with virtual water purchase agreements, we can drop the weighted average cost of capital by 200 to 300 basis points per project, which is in real world terms a really big benefit in the long-term financial viability of many of these projects. So how does that drop in capital cost due to the net present value of the project and the rate of return for that project? And you may want to elaborate on what the weighted average cost of capital and net present value and things like that are for those in our audience who may not speak finance every day.
Yeah, definitely. So ultimately, lower cost of capital can be the difference between a good water project remaining on paper and actually getting built. And so a developer may have excellent technology and strong operating economics, but if future revenue is uncertain or difficult to verify, lenders price that uncertainty into the financing. And so that means more expensive debt or more equity dilution and a higher hurdle before anyone will fund that construction. And so under the assumptions in our current models, a standardized long-term and bankable purchase agreement could potentially reduce the project's cost of capital. So essentially how expensive that project is to be financed or the capital needed to finance a project by up to 300 basis points. But the mechanism is really straightforward. So more predictable revenue can support greater debt capacity. It can reduce the amount of expensive equity required and increase the present value of a project's future cash flows. So it can also improve the developer's equity return as well. And so one important sort of CFO distinction here is lowering the discount rate does not mechanically change a product's unlevered operating IRR, just changes how much a future cash flow is worth today and how efficiently the project can be financed.
Yeah, that was great. I think, I was talking to a friend recently about this, and I used the analogy of our mortgages as a way of relating to it, right? If you have an opportunity to buy a home and you're offered an 8% mortgage versus a 5% mortgage, Go with the 5.
Yeah.
And that when we talk about 300 basis points, that's 3%.
Yeah.
And so that reduction in what it really means from a viability of the payment structure, the debt structure, makes a really big difference, particularly on these longer term projects.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So we frequently see heavy industrial manufacturers who are needing large volumes of water, but they are also seeking to maintain their social license to operate within the communities that they exist in and serve. And so they're faced with a make versus buy dilemma. How do I get this water? Do I build the infrastructure to make my own water? Do I buy it, etc.? And this can either look like deployment of capital, what we in finance we call capex, like big dollars, $20 million to build a proprietary infrastructure that serves just me, or they can potentially buy it from municipalities or other suppliers. How does Kreneon change the what is either an on-balance sheet or off-balance sheet choice for these folks that are facing this this conundrum?
Yeah, so I think Kreneon gives companies a way to support dependable new supply without forcing them to become water infrastructure owners. And so most technology and industrial companies do not want to own a desalination plant or operate a water recycling facility. They want really 3 things: dependable supply, predictable commercial structure, and credible evidence that the new water was actually produced. So today, their options are often pretty unattractive. They can invest a significant amount of capital in proprietary infrastructure, remain exposed to constrained municipal supply, or purchase claims that may not provide the operating certainty or audit grade evidence that they need. And so we create another path. A company can enter into a standardized long-term agreement that helps support a third-party new water project get built. The producer continues to operate the physical asset and deliver water into the appropriate local system. We at Kreneon, we verify that production, we record the unit, and we support the contract and settlement workflow. So that gives the buyer a repeatable procurement mechanism and credible proof without requiring them to design, construct, and operate the infrastructure themselves. So I would describe it sort of as an asset-light procurement model rather than promising universal off-balance sheet treatment. The accounting will always depend on the specific contract. But the strategic advantage is simple. They can secure credible new supply without turning the buyer into a water utility.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked about the buy side. Let's talk about the supplier side. We see one of the privileges of working in this space is we get to engage with a bunch of really innovative and compelling companies like Tsunami or Desalinator or AirBuild or all of these different folks who are pushing the boundaries of what's possible in water production or water recycling. These guys are sitting there, they're ready to deploy their tech. They have engagements with various municipalities, but we hear pretty often that folks get frustrated. They get trapped waiting on municipal bonds to be raised or grants or various forms of federal funding to come through. So how does Kreneon's digital registry change the game for the supplier when it comes to accelerating that capital velocity?
Yeah, I think by providing them with a repeatable contract and settlement process, it provides them with the proof that they need that they can finance and scale their projects. So the technology for the new water supply currently exists, but it's not really the same as sort of being a financeable technology when it comes to how the capital markets evaluates this. And so the developer can prove that its system produces water, but a lender still needs to know who's going to pay for it, how the output is going to be measured, how ownership is documented, and what happens if delivery changes and whether that same diligence can be reused on the next project. And so this is where Kreneon's registry comes into play. But the registry alone really isn't the main solution. The value comes from the full chain of proof that we provide in the registry. So we verify the source data. We turn that source data into a standard water lot. The registry can show the changes in ownership, and all that data can be used in a repeatable contract. And the verified settlement is also on the system. And so together, all those elements turn a technical achievement on the water production side into a commercial record that a capital provider can evaluate. And so once the market has reusable production and settlement data, the next project doesn't have to restart every part of that diligence process from zero.
Yeah, yeah. Part of what we've seen with the energy sector and why so much renewable energy has scaled so quickly is what you mentioned with regard to the standardized contracts. There are various standardized contracts that exist all over the world. And so when a developer comes in and is like, oh, this is the contract, these are the terms, this is the infrastructure that stands behind it, this is what the terms are. Okay, check. It takes what was, months and months of bespoke negotiations, but that were completely different from this site to that site and this thing to that thing, and it's like, no, this is done. We're good. Check.
Yeah.
And so it's a huge accelerant. Yeah,
definitely.
So as we look out like 5 years or so, the financial architecture that you're building becomes the baseline global standard for water lot clearing. How do the world's largest institutional allocators or family offices view water differently in the future than how it's viewed today? We're successful. How does it change?
Yeah, definitely. So I think the success doesn't mean that every type of water around the world suddenly trades on one global price. Water is inherently local. Geography, quality, reliability, and production pathway all matter. Success means that comparable categories of new supply have credible reference curves that Kreneon has built. So an investor could understand the economics of verified desalinated supply in one region, recycled industrial water in another, or a particular reliability and delivery profile using the transparent definitions and trusted settlement data that are generated through the Kreneon system. And so contracts could reference those curves, developers could use them in project underwriting, corporate buyers could use them in procurement, lenders, insurers, and other capital markets providers could use them to evaluate and price risk. And so that's ultimately going to change how institutions view the category. Today, they often see disconnected, bespoke water projects. In the future, through Kreneon, they could see more legible infrastructure market with standardized units, contract-backed cash flows, and comparable operating and pricing data. And so I think through that development, it's going to enable much more funding to come into the water space and lead to many more projects being developed.
That is absolutely the hope, and that is what we expect we will see. I look forward to that day. As Mike says, consider in the future water scarcity might not be a thing.
Yeah.
That would be pretty incredible. Well, anything else you'd like to add before we close today?
I think the main thing that I want the viewers to remember about Kreneon is that water scarcity is the problem everyone can see and everyone's aware of. The missing market infrastructure is the opportunity most people overlook. And so we need to build dramatically more new water supply, but that cannot happen efficiently if every project uses a different unit, a different contract, or a different method of establishing value. So where I think the big value and big opportunity within Kreneon is we're building that common unit. We're building really the trusted settlement record, and ultimately the reference prices that can make the new supply easier to buy, build, and finance.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much, sir, for joining us. It was wonderful to see you. I will say adieu and wish you a great rest of your day. Go eat some Tex-Mex for me. We'll talk soon. Thank you all for joining us at Unfiltered at the Water Cooler.
Okay, thanks so much. Thanks for having me.